Alrighty, so this is the video on how to slurry pack your column. So here's the column that we're going to be using, and the first step is to get about a pea-size piece of cotton. So we can put that in the column, and we can use a long pipette to force that down into the neck. So you don't want it to be too tight so that solvent won't flow, but you don't want it to be so loose that it doesn't stop the sand. So once we have the cotton in here, we can put our column in the back of the hood and clamp that in. So we can take our powder glass funnel, put that on top, and we're gonna put some sand for chromatography. So there's a different type of sand for the column, and it's labeled for that. So we can use our scoopula to scoop some sand into the column. You wanna make sure that you add enough sand so that it goes up to the shoulder, so where the glass stops being tapered. And you wanna also make sure that you don't have any cotton exposed. You want a nice level surface to make a nice level load of silica. So now that we have our sand in, we're going to load just a very small amount of our mobile phase here to get the sand wet. So I'm going to pour this very softly down the side of the funnel so that the sand is now wet. And so this is important because we don't want the sand to be very loose flowing so it doesn't just fly around. So we can drain this just a little bit. So there we go. And you want to make sure that your sand is level. So my sand is good, but if yours is not, you can take a scoopula and you can tap it a few times to make sure that it's level. So once you have the sand added, the next step is to measure out the amount of silica that you want to load into your column. So there's 3 ways you can do this. 1 is to measure by mass, 2 is to measure by volume, and 3 is to use the column itself before packing it. But for here, we'll just put a random amount so we can show that, but you would want to measure your silica. So we'll just put silica in this beaker. Okay. So next, let's put this out of the way. We're going to take our mobile phase and we're going to create a slurry. So a slurry just means that we have an insoluble solid kind of suspended in a liquid that's floating around. So I pour just a little bit to cover the level of the silica that I had. So I'm not pouring the entire beaker full, it's just to cover the level of the silica. And now I'm mixing this up so that the solid isn't stuck on the bottom. It's actually suspended in the liquid. And here's the tricky part. So you want to pour this slurry into your column, but you don't want to disrupt the sand layer because you want that to be level. You want both the bottom of the silica and the top of the silica to be as level as possible so all dimensions are even. So I'm mixing this, and then I'm going to pour down the side of this so that my silica flows down the wall and doesn't disrupt my sand level. So from there, you'll notice I still have some silica left over in my beaker, and if I had measured this, I want to get all of the amount that I wanted to measure into the column. So I have to open this, and one way we can make this go a little faster is we can create a flash for this. So for the flash, we just have the plastic powder funnel or the plastic mini funnel attached to the nitrogen line up here, and we can get a nice gentle flow of nitrogen. Take out this and gently push that down. They go a little faster. And so at this point, I'm not letting the silica run dry. That's still entirely covered. But now I have my mobile phase back in my beaker so I can get the rest of the silica. It may take maybe 2 or 3 times to get all of your silica, but you don't need to get every last tiny speck. And you'll notice I poured a little harder there because I wanted to get as much as I could, and I wasn't worried about disrupting my sand layer that time. So I'm repeating this. So there comes a point when you want to not waste too much time trying to get all of your silica. So at this point, I would say for my beaker, I'm done. I don't need to get any more from there. Now I want to make sure that all of my walls are rinsed. I don't want any silica up here though. So I'm going to just get, so what you can do here is you can get your pipette and just rinse the walls down. So I'm washing all the silica that was stuck in my funnel. And now my funnel is pretty much clean. So I can wash the walls of the column itself. And you want to kind of wash all around. So at this point, I think I'm good on mine. So I can put my bubble phase back into my beaker, and I'll use my flash device thing to do this. So I'm not pushing super hard, but this does increase the flow rate. And now when I get down to just above the level of the silica, so there's still a slight level here, and I'm going to slide this up so it's easy to see. But from here, what you want to do is take your scupula or some other thing and give it a few taps and just make sure that the silica is as level as you can get it. Now, what I'm going to do is drain this just barely below the level of the silica. So I want the entire top to be dry, just like that. So it is ever so barely dry at the top, and the reason for this is because we don't want to disrupt that. And so if the silica is in the mobile phase, it's very easy to disrupt, but when it's dry, it's not so easy to disrupt. So at this point, I have my sample here that I want to load, and I'll take my pipette and I will very gently load it on the top of the silica here. And I'm very careful not to disrupt the level of the silica. I let it run down the sides of the column. Like that. And then once again, I'm going to drain this onto the silica. So I don't even need to use the flash because there's so little. And now the top is just barely dry. And I'm going to add one more layer of sand. So I can use my funnel. So now that this is dry, I can add the sand. If I were to do this with a little bit of solution in here, what would happen is the sand and the silica would kind of exchange because the silica is so loose flowing in solution. But because it's dry, the sand just falls right on top. And so there's no right or wrong amount of sand to have on the top. You just want to have a layer that will protect this so that when you pour more mobile phase on, you're not disrupting the top level of the silica. And so here, I'm going to very gently just lastly pour some more mobile phase on to wet the sand. And at this point, you're ready to run your column.